Welcome back. So, something went wrong. Something went wrong on Friday when I tried to back our way into Paxos by looking at all the simpler sort of pseudo protocols or mini protocols that don't quite get us Paxos. And I'm not totally sure what happened because this has been an effective strategy in the past. I might just have been not totally with it. So I want to recap a little bit of the stuff that I covered yesterday, but I don't want to lose a lot of time on it because I think a lot of you are ready, certainly from the discussion on Piazza, to jump into the nitty-gritty of the actual protocol and then study the protocol, write it down on the board, and start looking at its behavior in a bunch of different runs. As I said, earlier in the year, I do prefer to teach it in this weird, constructive way because in my experience, having been a student of Paxos, being presented with a protocol that is so complicated it doesn't even fit on a single page, and then trying to understand why it had to be so complicated wasn't necessarily the best thing. Osterhout's style of presenting the material helped convince me, at least, even if I failed to convince you all, that all the pieces of complexity are sort of essential, that if we took just one of them away, we would have a protocol that resembled Paxos, but that didn't necessarily always satisfy agreement. Right? So let's just take 10 minutes at the beginning of class and talk over some of those strawmen. Maybe along the way I'll do a better job of communicating to you all the intuition for why I chose them. Right? Because what I ended up saying on Piazza was, I believe that you all believe me when I showed you how these pseudo protocols, these strawmen, don't work. But maybe we weren't on the same page for why we picked them. And I wanted this idea of sort of inevitability. So did anybody remember what the first straw man was?
Single acceptor.
Yeah, right, and that was because we were saying, well, we think that of these three properties, actually three with a footnote, right? Consensus satisfies what? Agreement, validity,
And no SPF.
and then we said,
No SPF.
SPF, please, thanks. And that's the footnote. And why do we say that? Well, because in some sense, two-phase commit gives us 1, 2, and 3. And that's not a great protocol for the purposes that we're going to be using consensus for. So agreement, validity, termination. We convince ourselves that of these three, this one seemed like the really hard one, and the one that was kind of highest stakes. If I want a consensus protocol where sometimes we disagree about what we got consensus on, it's not a very useful consensus protocol. So in service of coming up with a fault-tolerant consensus protocol that satisfies the defined agreement, we try to come up with the simplest imaginable protocol that certainly satisfies agreement, right? And that was the single acceptor. Why am I arguing that it satisfies agreement? Why does it definitely? What's a one sentence explanation for how this could never violate agreement? Because there's only one person doing the agreeing. I always agree with myself. Or visually, there's only one box that you can put an output in. And since you can only put one output in it, you're never going to have two outputs that disagree. Right? So, trivially satisfies agreement, and we didn't like it. Why? Well, so the acceptor could die, and we could go unavailable, and that would be a shame. Violate termination. But worse than that, what? Worse than that, it could fail after having accepted a value. Which means if we try to use another acceptor, we could disagree. Right? So that's no good. Violates termination, possibly violates agreement. So what do? We said, well, okay, there's got to be more than one acceptor. Right? And if there's going to be more than one acceptor, I think we all agree, yeah.
Perhaps this is a bit of a stupid question, but what exactly is the problem if one acceptor crashes after accepting something? Because nothing ever happens after that.
Well, no, because that's a fair point. So we all agree that it could definitely violate termination. Although one might be tempted to say, no, it doesn't, because if the single acceptor crashes, you make another one. Well, the problem is if you make another one, that single acceptor might have crashed after accepting value. Which means if you make another one, you could run afoul of agreement. So in some sense, single acceptor, you're definitely going to violate termination or agreement depending on how you interpret single acceptor. Yeah?
I guess what I'm confused by is how would it violate agreement, but if it crashes, then that value doesn't exist anymore than agreed.
Well, no, because the very minute the single acceptor chooses, remember we have this terminology. This is pretty important. Let me write this down, just because it's going to come up a bunch. So we have this terminology in Paxos or in consensus systems in general, first of all around the roles, right? So there's like proposers and acceptors, right? But we also have this terminology around decisions. We have this idea of accepting, which, as we learned as we developed this protocol, may not always be a once and for all thing, right? Acceptors may sometimes accept a value, and then later decide that they need to change their mind and accept a newer value. Versus this concept of choosing, or equivalently deciding, depending on the book or the paper, choose or decide, which basically is the currency of agreement. So if we choose something, there can only be one thing that is chosen. But we might be able to accept multiple things. So the problem is if we have a single acceptor, we say what the acceptor does is it accepts and ultimately chooses the first value that it hears. So somebody comes along and says 1, he says 1. It's chosen. That means that if he were to die, and we spawned another acceptor who for some reason chose 2, now 1 is chosen, and 2 is chosen, which is a violation of agreement. Okay? But as I said, we're going to make a distinction in more refined protocols between accept, things that acceptors can do, and decisions, which are going to be true when a majority has accepted. Okay, so that's what we got to. Single acceptor didn't work, we're going to need more than one acceptor. And if we want to have more than one acceptor and we don't want to run afoul of agreement, we probably want to say something like, the value that is chosen is the value that is accepted by the majority of the acceptors, because we know that any two majorities are going to have an intersection. This is going to come in, this was important in quorum application, this is going to be important here as well. Okay, so more than one acceptor, majority have accepted, but then we looked at accept the first value they see. Did that work? No. Anybody remember why? That's the easiest thing, right? Is like, if acceptors only lock into the first value, our protocol evolutions are simple, right? We don't have to worry about the protocol going on forever and acceptors changing their minds over and over again, right? Yeah?
This is a problem when there's more than 2 things to accept. If we have like 3 proposals and 2 of 5 pick one proposal, 2 of 5 pick another proposal, 1 of 5 picks the third.
We can have split vote. Exactly. Remember I showed you this one with like 5 timelines where I said, well, yeah, you could have this situation where we're like x equals 1, x equals 1, x equals 2, x equals 2, x equals 3. Okay, every acceptor has accepted their first value, but there does not exist a majority. And because acceptors only accept the first value, there will never be a majority. So we violate termination. So
Wait.
forget that.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So it has to be majority, but it's not majority right now. It's just
Say again?
there's the 5 nodes and the 2 acceptors for each one.
Uh-huh.
In order to be a majority, it has to be 3 acceptors, right?
That's correct.
But there's the 2 acceptors.
It's not majority.
What is your so that's just it. Is that no value was chosen, nor will one ever be,
Because there's no majority.
because there's no majority.
That's the problem.
Right? So we can't say that x equals 1 is chosen, we can't say that x equals 2 is chosen, we can't say that x equals 3 is chosen, and there is no next move that we can make, because all these guys are locked into their first choice. Which means they can't accept the first value. Yeah.
So, if a hypothetical protocol never terminates, does it mean that it violates agreement, or it can never violate agreement and it never
If it never terminates, we'd say it never violates. So like terminates is like chooses something, right? So a protocol that never terminates won't violate agreement. And in fact, we can write a protocol that trivially doesn't violate agreement. That just doesn't do anything.
Just to verify, the issue with split vote would occur within the three processes, right?
Let's see. Well, yeah, sure. But yeah, trivially, that everybody can accept their own, right? But it's easier to show a non-trivial one with 5. You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. Thank you. Okay? So, so simplest imaginable thing didn't work. Which implies that more than one acceptor is necessary. So it must be the case that more than one acceptor is necessary. It wasn't an arbitrary decision. We tried the simplest thing, and okay. I haven't provided a justification for why it has to be majority. It just seems like the same thing. acceptors can't accept the first value, ergo, they must sometimes accept multiple values or change their minds, right? If this doesn't work, this is certain. Right? So now we're at this point where whatever protocol solves consensus, if one exists, it is a protocol assuming these roles and this terminology that has more than one acceptor, where acceptors do not necessarily accept the first value. Right? And then we looked at this case where we're like, okay, well, if you have to accept multiple values, what if you just always accept, like, the last value? Right? First didn't work, last seems legit, right? Why not? What happened there?
Some determinism.
Well, we can get in a situation, right, in which we have 1, 2, 3 people accept x equals 1. And the very instant that 3 of them accept it, by our definition, we say x equals 1 is chosen, right? But then we could have this other proposer out here who says x equals 2, x equals 2, x equals 2, and look, x equals 2 is chosen. Because this guy, acceptor whatever 3, acceptor 2, saw both and chose the latest. So that doesn't work. That violates agreement. And we sort of paused and said, well, what went wrong here? The problem is that if you're going to have an accept the last proposal, you need some way to prevent a conflict of this kind, right? And the observation was one way to prevent a conflict. And you need some way to converge. You need some way that you don't just keep, you don't want to disagree like you did here. And you also don't want it to be the case that you keep forgetting the last value, because then you'll never finish, right? Then somebody else comes along and does a new proposal, somebody else comes along and does a new proposal, you never decide, right? You want to like converge. And so the observation was, one way to converge would be to do a recon phase that sees if someone has already accepted something. Because if they have, then you can just propose what was already accepted. You'll win, your proposal will win, but there will be no conflict. Because the two conflicting things both wanted the value of x to be the same. Right? So this was the big leap. But it wasn't that big a leap, because we had seen two-phase protocols in this class before. Right? If the latest protocol always wins and everything keeps changing, the thing will never finish. Right? But if the latest protocol always wins, but the latest protocol should always try to reinforce whatever has already been decided, we could converge. Right? So that looked promising, right? Two-phase protocol. And we looked at an execution in which it would solve the problem, where this thing goes out and does its recon phase after a particular value was already chosen. It just keeps promoting the thing that everybody already knows. But we saw how even in that case, we have the following race condition. Well, it's a race condition we already saw, right? Which is that this proposer does its recon phase, nothing's out there. They propose x equals 1. This proposer does their recon phase, everything's fine. They propose x equals 2. And then depending on how we define the rest of the protocol, it's either the case that we have a conflict, or we say that, well, x wasn't really chosen here. X equals 1 wasn't really chosen, which means x equals 2 is chosen, which means somebody can come along and say x equals 3, and this damn thing will never finish. Right? Yeah?
Is the recon phase trying to figure out if something has already been chosen?
That's exactly right. So you're going out there and saying, if something's already been chosen, I'm running afoul of a conflict. However, I'm not running afoul of a conflict if I make sure that I suggest the thing that is already chosen. And so you go out and say, hey, did people already decide? Because if they did, I'm just going to jump on the bandwagon. And I'm going to propose the thing that was already chosen. Okay, but there's still this race condition here that we haven't solved. So it's like, crap, recon helps mostly. But if two proposers concurrently begin a proposal, we need a tiebreaker, a deterministic tiebreaker, in addition to the two-phase. Right? So that brought us to proposals must be numbered. They must be deterministically orderable. And an easy way to deterministically order things is to assign natural numbers to them. Proposals must be numbered. Numbers should be two things. What were the two properties we wanted of these numbers? Monotonically increasing, so that a later proposal will have a higher number than an earlier proposal. Why do we want that? Why do we want later numbers to have higher later proposals to have higher numbers than earlier proposals, and why do we want later proposals to beat earlier proposals?
They might have more information about the stage, the process.
Yeah. Anybody want to say that a different way? Like, why would we not want to say we're going to number protocols, but the number proposals, the earlier proposals win rather than the later ones? Why wouldn't we say that?
I can just give an example. If you're like doing leader election and someone votes for process B, and then someone else votes for process C, and then process B dies during trying consensus seeking, then everyone has to agree on process B because it came first.
Good, absolutely. Then you're never going to get anywhere because everybody's like, I can't do that because B is the once and future king. You know what I mean? And B is the only thing that I'll ever recognize. Whereas if you always said, any new person going to be leader has a chance of being leader, you would have a chance of making progress. Right? You never get locked up. So that's kind of the intuition, is that if we say that earlier proposals win, a proposer could choose a really low number, start doing something, get some people to accept it, die, and then the protocol's locked up. Nobody else can make any progress. Because the dead guy wins over all the new live guys. That would be insane, right? So we want the proposals to go up, and we want higher proposals to win, so that no matter what, there's always a chance of a new proposer coming into the world and proposing something with a higher number than anybody's ever seen and making progress. Okay.
You also mentioned that the recons would be stale.
Oh, yeah, we'll see an example of that when we do the protocol in detail, right? So like in general, yeah, you might do your recon and be like, immediately after your recon, you're like, oh crap, this is never gonna work, based on what I found out there. You know? Okay, so I just wanted to rehash that because I think, and maybe I haven't convinced you, I'm just telling you by fiat, it's fundamental, right? Like this would arguably, like, it's not fundamental that proposals must be numbered. It's fundamental that we need a way to order concurrent proposals, and numbering is a way to do it, right? It is fundamental that we need more than one acceptor doing majority, accepting multiple values, and so on. And what's interesting is, I mentioned a bunch of protocols, Paxos, Raft, view stamp replication, and others. They're different protocols, but they all have these pieces. Did you have a question? No. Okay, Paxos. I'll just do it on this board because it's the biggest one. You're gonna get chocolate over your head. Oh, my hat! Oh! It's a cashmere hat and everything. It's cool. It's like it comes with the.
At least now you look like you worked for that.
Yeah. It looks like I did my one job. Yeah. Right. Check my notes because there's details that if I get them wrong, it doesn't work. Choose a new proposal number n. Anybody want to remind me how you do that? So the first thing you do is pick a number. How do you pick a number?
One bigger than the last one.
One bigger than the last one to make it monotonically increasing and
It turns by process ID.
salt it in with your process ID and it's unique. Right? Does that make sense to you?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So do some bit strings.
Yep. Or yeah, you just
Higher order bits are monotone.
exactly. I would shift my sequence number and then put
Right.
my sequence my ID because we want the sequence number comparison to dominate and the ID to only be a tiebreaker. Right? So we're going to broadcast a prepare and message to all acceptors. And this came up the other day, like, because we're only going to require a vote from the majority, we didn't need to send it to all the acceptors. But it's a damn good idea to send it to all the acceptors because we don't know which ones are up or which ones will respond in a timely manner. So you send it to all of them, and as soon as you hear back from the majority, you declare victory. Right? So over here, control transfers over the acceptors. If n is greater than a local global variable that we store called what we call min proposal, then two things. We're going to set min proposal to n, and we're going to respond with two other local variables. Accepted proposal, accepted value.
Let's say prepare.
Say again?
Let's say prepare.
Prepare. Yeah, and the only argument to prepare is actually the number. Okay, we have min. Just give you some intuition around these variables before I use them anymore. We have min proposal. We have accepted proposal. We have accepted value. And the intuition for these is min proposal, as you can see, is a variable that we're just going to make sure is at least as high as the highest proposal we've ever seen. And the intuition for why it's called min proposal is that I, an acceptor, will never accept or even respond to a proposal numbered lower than min proposal. Okay? I will not vote, I will not agree, I will not accept for things lower than my current min proposal. My min proposal, as you can see, is monotonically increasing as I get messages. If I ever do get around to accepting a value, something we have not seen yet in the protocol, I set two variables. The proposal number of the proposal that I accepted, which presumably, at least at that time, will be the same as min proposal, and the actual value of the proposal, for example, x is 1. Does that make sense? Yeah.
So you don't respond negatively? If
I
you
didn't
see
say anything about responding negatively, did I? So you,
Well,
yeah,
but maybe.
so it would appear that I would either say else, but I'm not going to say else. So you actually just ignore it if that isn't satisfied.
Okay.
Okay. Good.
So, what if a proposer gets behind the other proposers and he never catches up because you're just gonna ignore, you heard somebody has a higher number and this guy's stuck behind, you know?
Don't you think it's a good idea to hear the whole protocol before asking
yeah.
that question since it might be answered by the rest of the protocol?
Close to-
But yeah, sure. I mean, liveness is a concern, right? So we're going to have to imagine that it is possible for new proposers to come to being sometimes if all the other proposers are dead. We're going to imagine that proposers, when something doesn't work out, will try again with a higher number. Maybe some of the responses they get back give them hints about how high the number has to be. We'll get there. So, when a majority of responses are received, we'll send another message. Let's see, how should I write this? Broadcast except n, val to all acceptors where val is one of two things. The highest numbered proposal responses, go through this in detail. Remember, we got these responses that was like, oh, if I have already accepted a proposal, I tell you what its number and its value were when I respond to your prepare. Which means you might get back some values that were already accepted. In fact, you can get back more than one. So you're going to pick the highest numbered proposal among the responses, the value of the highest number, the value associated with the highest number proposal among the responses. Or whatever you want otherwise. Right? So for example, I'm like, hey, this is proposal 1.1. It goes out. And an acceptor sends back, cool, I respond, but these are empty. Like, I've never accepted anything. And another acceptor responds back and says, oh, actually, I have already accepted x equals 1 for proposal number 2.27. And it's like, oh crap, okay, so I'm going to have to broadcast an accept, not for what I wanted to send. I wanted to say x equals 1. But I have to ask people to accept whatever it was that you accepted. We'll see this in the Lamport diagram in just a minute. Y'all wanted to see the whole protocol, so I'm going to write out the whole protocol. Okay, so obviously we've sent an accept, and now we've gone over to the control of the acceptors again. We're going to respond to the accept in the following way. If n, remember n came in this message too, is greater than or equal to min proposal, that's looking good. Accepted proposal equals min proposal equals n. Accepted value is val. Return outside the if. Min proposal. What? Okay, what's happening here? Let's look at the happiest case, right? Where nobody's actually accepted anything first, and just see how this protocol runs through, right? So I have a proposer. Everybody's a proposer, but I'm going to focus on one proposer right now. And I have a couple of acceptors, let's say 3 acceptors. Which could also double as proposers if this guy disappears. He has this intent. He wants to set, weather equals sunny. He wants to get everybody to agree on that. We want to achieve consensus on the weather. Okay? So he says, I'm process 1, and this is my first proposal. So I'm going to pick a number, 1.1. That's my number. Right? Choose a new number. And I'm going to broadcast a prepare message to all of the acceptors that looks like this. Prepare 1.1. What do the acceptors do? Well, they check their min proposal, it's 0. 1.1 is indeed greater than 0. So they all set their min proposal to 1.1, right? And then they respond, and they're all identical. It's going to say, like, accepted proposal. Don't make me write that out. I'm just going to write AP. But, for example, A2 has never accepted another proposal. So the value of accepted proposal is empty. I'm just going to write the bottom symbol, right? And the value of accepted val is empty, too. And in fact, all 3 of these responses come back AP, bottom, bottom. We call this an unconstrained vote. All 3 of these acceptors have said, not only will I follow your proposal number 1.1, unless anything changes. At least for now, I'm going to follow your proposal. Oh, and by the way, your proposal is unconstrained in the sense that you can submit whatever decree you want, and I'm ready to accept it. Right? So in this case, life is good. At this point, right, we've satisfied this predicate. The majority of responses are received. Right? I don't even need to wait for the last one. And I can broadcast my accept message to everyone. My accept message looks like this. Accept what? 1.1, yeah,
Whatever.
weather is sunny, right? I could say weather is sunny because it wasn't the case that there was a highest numbered proposal among the responses whose value I must choose here. I can choose whatever I want. And now these acceptors are going to respond with what? Yeah, they're going to say 1.1. And this proposer, after sending this accept message, is going to await. Why wasn't this on my notes? Because this is part of the protocol.
Wait for acknowledgement.
Yeah, okay, here we go. When responses, it was on the other page. When responses received from a majority, if all are are n, proposal was chosen. Victory. Otherwise, begin again. And I can't write it because I've run out of space, but begin again with a new number higher than whatever came back. Right? Because otherwise you don't stand a chance. Now let's look at it. Yeah.
So you're not going to get a response at this stage without getting the initial proposal message delivered first, right?
That's right. So you also are going to want to, how does this work? You also,
So it's got 5-point delivery and all that sort of thing, right?
yeah,
So like you're not going to get a response.
no, by design, right, this guy, you just won't ever hear from this guy in the event that, that your proposal wasn't high enough. So you need a way to say, if none of this stuff happens and a timeout fires, you also go back to the beginning. That's absolutely right. It is in my notes, but that's right. Now let's look at these things in detail. So,
Question?
yeah,
So when you begin again, wouldn't you need to raise n? Since
that's what I just said. You pick a new one that is at least as high as any of the responses that came back and hopefully higher. Yeah. So that you have a chance to win. Everybody with me? So this is the Paxos protocol. Single site Paxos. Let's look at some examples, yeah? Which example should we look at first? How about the less happy case where a value's already been accepted? Okay? The constrained proposal example. Okay, so let's imagine we have this other proposer out here. And let's imagine I'm going to have to do an abridged version of the protocol to save myself some space. Let's imagine this is proposer 2. And so they've done proposal 1.2, and they came back unconstrained. So they said, kindly accept, and yes, they would send it to all. Oh, that is all. Oh, I'm doing it from the acceptor. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. Fine. Let's just imagine that there was this other acceptor 0. Okay. They say accept 1.2. Foo, I don't know. Okay, cool. 1.2. So now foo is chosen, right? And if foo is chosen, right? Because all came back n. And if foo is chosen, this whole system throughout all eternity had better not choose any other value than foo. And that's going to turn out to be okay, because when proposer 1 says, hey, I want to do proposal, let's just imagine that he gets lucky and picks a number higher than 1. He picks 2.1. He says, prepare 2.1. Because he requires responses from a majority of acceptors, and because something is only accepted or chosen when it's accepted by a majority of acceptors, he knows that if a value was chosen, he will learn about it in this phase. Because his majority, P1's majority, will intersect with any majority of any other proposer that succeeded in getting something accepted. As here. This acceptor might not know about it because they might have been like down or behind a network partition when this guy made progress. We know that this can happen because this is a fault-tolerant system that can make progress when not all the machines are up, right? However, well, there's two possibilities. Let's do the happy one first. The happy one is he gets to A1 after A1 accepted foo. So this thing is going to come back unconstrained. Okay? This thing is going to come back constrained, right? It's going to say response 1.2 foo. Right? So at this point, proposer 1 has received responses from a majority of acceptors. However, not all of them were unconstrained. Right? So what does he do?
Well, he didn't talk to A2. Why didn't he ask
It doesn't matter. A2 is behind a partition or something. Or, he talked to A2, and he got back constrained proposals. But that's a lot of lines. So we know that he doesn't need to talk to A2 because the protocol doesn't have a single point for that. So, but he could have been able to learn this game. So what does he do now?
He sends it to whatever he wants because his proposal is higher than the minimum proposal.
He doesn't have a majority. There's only 3 acceptors in this one. Yeah, but he has a majority of responses. I never said agreement. I said when a majority of responses are received, broadcast and accept where the value cares about what the responses were. Right? So he's going to say accept my number. Sorry, 2. Yeah, right. My number accept 2.1, comma what? Foo. He can't say it's sunny in Philadelphia or whatever because he has a constrained vote. So he's going to say accept 2.1 foo. Sends that out. And now these guys are going to come back and say, yeah, sure, 2.1, right? 2.1, that's the highest proposal I've ever seen, no problem. And now, not only did we not have a conflict, but A0 has now learned about foo, right? P1 has finished the work that I don't know who this was, P2 wasn't able to finish because they did their proposal during a network partition where A0 was unavailable. So you see, so P1 has essentially flushed the pipes, okay? But obviously, this could have happened a little differently, right? What do you think would have happened? What do you think would have happened if this thing had come out a little faster and landed, let's see. Let's say it landed out here before, no wait, that's not, never mind. Let's say this thing took longer, and this thing got out to A1 first, right? So this thing came down here. How would the execution have been different?
The responses to P1 would have been unconstrained.
The responses to P1 would have been unconstrained.
And the responses to P2 would have been...
P2 wouldn't have done anything wrong, because it would have never gotten a response to this. Actually, that's not true. Hold on. This is going to be good. Hold on. So, what if, though... Okay, let me just redraw the whole thing. So, because it could happen that... No, never mind. I was going to say, like, we only need a majority. So P2 could have gotten this guy and this guy, but that's not really true because if he got this guy here, this guy never would have gotten a response. And if he got this guy here, he never would have gotten a response. And so those are the only possibilities.
Why would you... Yeah.
Let's do it. So remember, we have these two competing proposals, 1.2 and 2.1. 2.1 is higher. If this guy managed to make it out to those two servers, and this guy managed to make it out to this server, this guy got 1 unconstrained vote, and this guy got 2 unconstrained votes. And this line has to touch down on this thing, either on this side of this or this side of this. And if it touches down early, this proposal is dead in the water. And if it touches down late, this proposal is dead in the water. In all of these scenarios, only one of these two proposals is going to get past phase 1. Right? Because we don't reply.
Why is it that P1's proposal would be dead in the water if it touched them after P2's response or proposal?
let's do
Because
it.
N from P1 is 2.1. And the min proposal would, on A1.
Oh, derp, sorry. All right, so if it touched down here, that's fine. So let me see. So this guy came back unconstrained. This guy came back unconstrained, right? Good. This one came back unconstrained. This one came back unconstrained. Now we know already that 2.1 is going to win. But let's see how it plays out.
The last one wouldn't be unconstrained.
It would be unconstrained. We haven't even gotten into phase 2. No values have been accepted.
No, A1 would respond with 1.2 and whatever no, it wouldn't have an accepted value, but it would have responded with
No.
right?
No, because we return an accepted proposal and accepted value, which are only set in the event we get to the accept phase with a high enough value. Right? So these will come back unconstrained. So P1's like, cool, I'm going to say accept 2.1, and it's sunny in Philadelphia or whatever, right? Okay, so meanwhile, and now there's a couple different ways that this could play out, so maybe I shouldn't draw it yet. Meanwhile, this person thinks they're going to win too. Now they're obviously not going to win, but they're going to try to send out an accept that says 1.2, I don't know, foo. Okay, now depending on when these things land, there are going to be different possible outcomes. We know this one's going to win. So this guy says accept. This goes out, accept. Respond. Let's just say that this one gets lucky. This is an interesting case, right? Where this node, A2, has accepted 1.2. Okay? These nodes have accepted 2.1 SP, and so we say 2.1 SP is chosen, right? Because it was accepted by a majority of acceptors. Now this thing's in flight, right? And it's going to touch one of those. It has to touch one of those because otherwise it doesn't have a majority. I don't care which one it is. If it doesn't matter where it touches down, right? If wherever it touches down, this guy, A1, is just going to return 2.1 min proposal, whether it touches down here or here. At which point, proposer 2 knows they're never going to win with 1.2. They're going to go back up here and say, I don't know, 2.2. Try again. Now, when they do 2.2, they're going to do a recom phase. They're going to learn that Sunny in Philadelphia was chosen. They're going to go ahead and propose Sunny in Philadelphia with proposal 2.2. It's the biggest. It wins, but we haven't conflicted. Yeah?
How do you, I guess maybe you're about to get to this, but how do you write a new value with this?
What's a new value? We have one job. It's to
you
decide
write
a
rainy in
value.
Philadelphia?
Huh?
How do you write rainy in Philadelphia? Like, because here you're responding with whatever the highest number, the value of the highest number proposal among the responses. How do you change the value that has been chosen?
You don't.
Okay.
It's a good question, because you're thinking practically, like, I want to use this to decide a totally ordered sequence of values, or I want to model my mutable store. There's a protocol that we're going to study later, like maybe Wednesday, possibly Friday, called multi-Paxos, where we start to look at, like, okay, how do you take this gadget that decides a thing and turn it into a gadget that decides an infinite sequence of things, starting with the 0th of them? So, like, yeah, you want that, but this doesn't do that. This doesn't try to do that. Okay. All we're supposed to do is not conflict. Should we look at a couple more pictures? So, like, let's do high-level stuff, right? So, what is happening in the first phase of this protocol? We're sending out a prepare message to a bunch of acceptors. Like, what is the proposer's intent in sending out a prepare message to a bunch of proposers? What are they trying to figure out? They're trying to figure out two things. Yeah.
It's trying to see if the acceptors have accepted something.
Yeah, trying to see if something's already out there, right? Because we're only trying to decide one thing. And so if it's already decided, we're wasting our time if we don't figure out what it is, right? So one thing is to decide if something's already been accepted, if our proposal is constrained. And then the other thing is to get this number n out there so that we can block potentially earlier numbered proposals that might be conflicting with us, right? So when an acceptor responds to a prepare request, they're telling them about information that they might not have. Oh, by the way, these are the values that I've accepted. This is the value that I've accepted, if any. And they're also making a promise, much in the way that participants in two-phase commit do? They're making a promise to that proposer to never vote on any proposal numbered lower than that one that they gave. There's no promise about a higher number. Like if somebody better comes along, I'm still going to follow them. But I promise to follow you over any lower people. And we need that property of higher number wins to make progress and people get stuck. Right? So that's what the prepare phase is. And then the accept phase is to attempt to install a value on the fleet of acceptors who have temporarily agreed to follow you, and to learn whether you failed, because if you failed, you might need to try again. Right? So find out what's out there, collect promises to be followed, get delivery on those promises if possible, if somebody hasn't come along and blocked you. Does that make sense? Two phases. And when we're done, so in some sense, every proposer will always attempt to run to termination, to run until a value is chosen. It's just the case that very often the value that they get chosen is sort of it's a trivial operation because that value was already chosen. A new proposer can always come to a meeting, ask everyone to follow him. Everybody's already accepted the value. He'll get everyone to accept his new value, which is that value. Right? Any questions?
When you increment n, you increment it to one higher than, or whatever, monotonically increases.
Yeah, so it's nice to know this information because it tells you not just whether your proposal was accepted or not, which is critical, but also gives you a hint about how high your number is going to have to be if you have a chance of winning in a subsequent round. Right? Now, does this always terminate? What is the path that might make it not terminate? So for example, you're saying, like, I choose a new number, I broadcast it, I eventually learn that there was some higher number out there, I give up, I choose a number higher than that, I start doing my thing, along the way I learn that some even higher number came in. Well, this shouldn't surprise us, right? Because we know that any deterministic protocol that solves consensus in an asynchronous network has executions that don't terminate, right? So it shouldn't surprise us that there could be executions that don't terminate, but let's take a really close look at exactly what could go wrong. What do you think could go wrong in terms of the protocol evolution that could cause that pathological behavior to happen, that could cause there to always be some goddamn higher number? Yeah?
In that 5 server example, like if they constantly fight over single nodes, like if, for your example, like A1 was, you had P1 try to get A2, and then they just increment your number over and try to fight against each other.
Well, like, what is it about the one acceptor though?
So they try to get the majority, so they fight over A2, and then A2 will say that it accepted 2.1, so therefore P1 will go to 2.2, or...
Yeah, well, it turns out we need to make it all the way through the protocol for that to really happen really bad, but that's exactly the intuition, right? So I could get complete phase 1, accept 1.2 x, complete phase 2. Oh wait, no, not quite complete phase 2. Sorry, my bad. Right, I completed phase 1, and it's looking good. I have a majority of acceptors that have agreed to follow me. They're not going to follow anybody lower than 1.2. I'm getting ready to ask them to accept my value x. Cool, cool. And then this other guy comes along, and he's like, cool, cool. You know, this is proposal 2.1. Okay, we'll get back our promises. Everything's unconstrained, cool. So we're going to ask you to accept 2.1 with the value of y. But let's hold there. And then this guy says, cool, can you please accept x? And he gets down here, and this one comes back and says, not a problem, 1.2, I totally accepted x. And then this one says, oh, the thing is, 2.1. It's like, shit, proposal 1.2 is never going to complete, but nothing's constrained, so I might still actually have a chance of passing x. So I'm just going to, like, start again with a higher number, you know, proposal 3.1. Yeah, thanks.
1.3?
No, oh, right. Why did I do 2.2? Hold on, right? It's fixable. 3.2. No problem. It's chalk. So, right. And then this guy's like, cool. But meanwhile, this guy's come out with his 3.2, right? And so this guy's like, yeah, you got it, we're totally gonna do Y. And then this guy's like, oh, actually, 3.2. This is called yeah.
So process two has message 1.2 and process one is message 2.1. Is there any reason why they both didn't start with 1, like 1.1 and 1.2?
No, they probably would have started with 1. Doesn't really matter though. I mean, you can start with whatever number you want, I suppose. Yeah.
How does this not violate termination?
It does, well, what I've shown you doesn't violate termination because it's a finite execution, and I would require an infinite execution to prove that we violated termination. But you could see how, if things carry on in this way, we might not ever terminate. And so it's not the same thing as saying that this violated termination, because these guys have infinitely many chances. This is what's interesting about Paxos. The Paxos protocol is only trying to do one thing, and yet it has infinitely many, infinitely long executions. That's weird, right? This goes on forever. And I don't just mean goes on forever in the sense of deadlocking, I mean live locking. Everybody's doing work, but they're not making any progress. Yeah.
Could you potentially use randomness to like in your increments, or assume randomness in the network timings and show that it does terminate?
So, okay, first let me say, the answer to a question, could you use randomness to do X, is almost always yes. But I think the idea of, randomness in the network, in some sense, like, we've learned that networks are high variability, like super high variability, right? Which means that the likelihood of a synchronization storm of this kind in a realistic network is probably vanishingly small anyway, because like the randomness is already there.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, synchronization storms do happen in practice, and you're absolutely right. So this is a little bit off topic. It's a little bit systems-y from the protocol side. But let's talk about that for a minute. So, ameliorating non-termination. So can you spell out what you mean by random? Like, what would it look like to use randomness?
Well, the key about the network thing here is that, like,
let's imagine that the network is synchronized. Let's imagine there's no randomness in the network. It's synchronized in that way.
So you have the problem of like phase synchronization or like phase multiples.
That's right.
Right. And I don't know, my idea was to increment by random numbers.
Increment our proposal numbers by random numbers?
Why, like, yeah, using randomness in increments, because like if you assume, I think like the initial idea.
That's not going to work because like, well, I see your point. Because then if I can have the higher number in 2 goes, then I would have, because how do you prevent this? You make sure that P2 has enough time to complete phase 1 and 2. Yeah. Because the synchronization storm is P2 completes phase 1, then P1 completes phase 1, right? Then P2 attempts phase 2, then P2 attempts, and so on, right? So that's actually an interesting point that I haven't heard before, which is that you can actually salt randomness into the choice of seeds to make it unlikely that we would keep alternating the biggest number. But that could also definitely affect fairness. Like, I might prefer to choose a higher number than some random number that you pick. But that's interesting. You could also use randomness, though, in the timing, right? So, an example I like to give, how many of you study like Ethernet? Have you taken like in collision control and Ethernet? Right? The idea being that, you're sending radio over this wire, so there's a light that, you can tell if there's a collision. You can tell if 2 people try to send at the exact same second. And so when you try to send something and the collision light goes on, you try again. But you don't try again instantly, because you're going to both keep trying again, right? And the sort of analogy for this is like, dinner table conversation, right? You're sitting around a table with a whole bunch of people, and everybody's like, and everybody starts talking at the same time, right? But instead of just like carrying on talking over each other, they like very quickly detect that there's a collision, and they're like, oh, sorry. And then they like try to start again. But if it happens a few times where they collide, first of all, they start like not immediately trying, but adding a little bit of time. And then if they collide a bunch of times, they start like waiting a lot more, right? You're like, right? So that's called, random plus exponential backoff. Because a collision at dinner table conversation on Ethernet and in Paxos is something that can be detected. There was a collision. When there is a collision, you can do something differently. Like you can flip a coin about how long you wait before you try again. And every time you get another collision, you pick a random number ranging from 1 to twice as big, or something like that. Right? Does that make sense? And these are, what I like about these kinds of protocols is, these are protocols that are inevitable. They're protocols to be discovered. Yeah.
How are we interpreting all acceptors? Because step of the proposer, more like why does P2 never reach A3 in this diagram?
It doesn't matter. I mean, so, like, it would always have tried to, but as I said, we know that it doesn't need to, right? Because we don't have a single point of failure. So A3 could be down, or A3 could be on the other side of a network partition, and to satisfy the no SPF property, P2 must be able to make progress. So in some sense, P2 would always try to talk to A3, but she doesn't need to. And to make the diagrams less cluttered, it just didn't show.
So then, on the responses from the acceptors, when we're checking all n, it's all the n's from the responses there. Yeah, or it would have to be.
Well, of course.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Questions? Other questions? Let's see. We have some minutes left. Random and exponential backoff would be a way to solve this problem. What would be another way to solve this problem? So if you detect a collision, try again, but with some randomness, with some delay.
If you detect a collision, don't try again. If you flip the coin, decide to try again or not.
No, I mean, I think that's totally reasonable, right? It's to be like, this wouldn't happen if when P2 learned that there was a P1 out there with a higher number, she just shut the fuck up. Right? Because then P1 would have an opportunity to finish what she was doing. And then if I came back later, it would be okay. Yeah. So I could just stop. If you're like, hey, there's something else out there, there can only be one.
So this kind of ties in two questions. But if A2 forwarded its higher order proposal to P1 with its first, like the first time there's a collision?
You're optimizing the protocol. You're saying that, wait, where?
Okay, so P1 sends, P2 sends a proposal to A2. A2 says, yeah, sure, whatever. P1 sends phase 1 and hits A2.
Here's the thing. You're trying to suggest an optimization that will allow P2 to learn something here that they're going to learn here anyway. So I would argue it's not a very important optimization.
No, I'm saying send it the other way.
Send it the other way.
Like there's a proposal out there that's going to beat yours.
But it's not.
But the
1.2
idea
is not going to beat 2.1.
No, the first way was right. But the idea is like I've seen a proposal that's going to beat yours, right? Like the proposal you just sent me is going to lose,
right? For
sure.
And that's what I'm saying. That's an optimization, right? Because in phase 2, if there exists a proposal that is going to beat mine, I will learn of it in phase 2. And so you're saying like you don't have to wait for phase 2. And I'm saying yeah, you do, unless you want to make this protocol more complicated. But you could do that. You could do that, right? Yeah.
So you were saying that one thing we could do, Saga, is if P1 had a better one, then P2 would just stop.
Yeah, at the very moment that you learn, instead of being like, oh, you had a slightly bigger one this time, I'll fight you, it could just be like, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So then how would A1 ever learn about it if P2 just stopped?
That's a fair question. I guess there's a couple answers to it. One would be it doesn't matter, it was accepted by a majority. Any subsequent majority will hit, like, even if somebody goes out and hits these two nodes, they'll learn of it. Any majority will include a node that knows. So if one node gets left out, it doesn't fundamentally matter. And then the bottom line is, some other proposer could come in the future and fix things up. Yeah. Remember, fundamentally, we never said that Paxos requires that every acceptor learns of every value. We just said that values have to get accepted by a majority. Yeah?
So maybe I'm misremembering what you said. Isn't it the case that proposers and acceptors are the same?
Well, here's what I tried to say by erase already. There's these two roles. Unlike in two-phase commit, in a typical deployment, all agents play all roles. For pedagogical purposes,
doesn't matter.
It's easier for me to have the proposers on the outside and the acceptors on the middle. And in this picture, when I draw a picture like this, I want you to imagine that this is a different computer than this. In a practical deployment, you wouldn't do that. Because like, why wouldn't you have all these acceptors being like, oh, by the way, I can also be a proposer if the other guys fall.
Yeah, but it still works because they're different processes.
They're different
even if
processes.
They're the same computer, right?
Sure, absolutely. Okay, we got 4 minutes left. What should I say? So this is the protocol. I hope you've written it down. It's pretty important. I don't know. Let's look at another couple executions since we have time. But
Question.
yeah.
Will Paxos fail to terminate if more than half of the acceptor nodes are down?
Yes. Yes. In general, we want to make sure that we've provisioned our Paxos cluster with enough acceptor nodes that we can tolerate the amount of crashes that we think can happen and still have a majority of acceptors. Absolutely. There's a pathological case of that. Let me see if I can remember it. Everything. The first thing is like, it's amazing. You should all get pens and papers. Try out some of the infinitely many variants of this protocol's execution. It's amazing how it always does the right thing. It's like truly amazing. Okay. Let's imagine a scenario in which I have gotten 1.1 prepared, and I got a single acceptor to accept 1.1x, and then I just die. Okay. This could happen. Prepare 2.1. Not a problem, not a problem. Everything's unconstrained. If I don't write it, it's unconstrained.